This is Molé Mama. Take a journey with me to my kitchen where I recreate some of my sweet Mama Rosa's best Mexican family recipes. I'll share the stories behind my grandma's magical molcajete, guacamole, crunchy tacos, mole, papas and chorizo chimichangas, Kahlua cake, crack cake, and oh so much more. You'll also get to meet guest chefs as they share the stories behind their yummy recipes. I believe that food is the sixth language of love. And if you're like me, it's your love that makes your food magical. Tune into Molé Mama on Thursdays at 6 p.m. for all the fun and love. You might want to eat first, because this show is going to make you oh so hungry. Que Dios te bendiga, as my mom would say. May God bless you. Hola, and welcome to Molé Mama Cooking with Love. We drive connection, unity, acceptance, and love across all cultures and generations. So just want to be very clear that all are welcome here, and we're delighted that you're listening. From Mother Teresa, spread love everywhere you go, and let no one ever come to you without leaving happier. Please check out our new podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Please leave us a review and subscribe. Once again, welcome to Molé Mama Cooking with Love, where we celebrate home chefs, entrepreneurs, side hustlers, and foodies like my sweet Mama Rose and my Tia Hubi. We talk about heritage and family recipes and traditional tools like my Grandma Magdalena's magical molcajete, and I remind you every week that the secret ingredient to every great recipe is our love. I want to welcome all of our returning listeners in the chat room, and welcome to our new listeners. And if you're looking for some really yummy, delicious, authentic Mexican recipes, please check out our Molé Mama Recipes YouTube channel, and you can make guacamole and crunchy tacos, enchiladas, Spanish rice, mole rojo, chimichangas, and so much more. And if you have any questions, please reach out. We'd love to help you make those recipes successful. So I am super excited about our show tonight. We have a very special guest, but before I introduce him, I want to tell you a little story. My prima Eva Zermeño is also here, and if you've listened before, you know that she is my co-host, and she is responsible for finding this amazing guest. And she has been working on this guest, I think, for about 3 years. So I think she wore them down, and they're finally here.
Hello, everyone.
So we're so excited. But tonight we have Juan Carlos Contreras, and he is Don Pilar's son. And Don Pilar, if you don't know it, makes like the most amazing tequila I've ever tried.
Yes.
And he also is a Mexican immigrant who came to this country and now has a thriving tequila business as well as several restaurants. So I am absolutely delighted that you're here, Juan Carlos. We are so fortunate to have you. Welcome to Molé Mama.
Bienvenido.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you here. Before we get started, is there anybody you want to say hello to that might be listening?
Well, saludos to Don Pilar, who I would have loved to have had here along with me because he is el mero hombre, the guy that we're going to be talking about. But he, being the hard worker that he is off in one of his restaurants along with Mom. So hello to them and the rest of my family.
Well, it's great to have you here. So when I was reading about your father, he came to this country, I think in 1966, and he was one of 13 children.
Right, which is probably par for the course for families back in the day in Mexico.
Right. And it also said that he went to school until the 6th grade, and then he started working with his family. Can you tell me a little bit about what kind of work he was doing with his family?
So he grew up in rural Mexico, right?
Okay.
So, a small little pueblo. This is in the 50s and 60s. He was born in 43, so he turned 75 this year. So.
And he's still working?
7 days a week.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's just the work ethic that they were instilled with.
Right.
And part of it, my dad is a joyous, very generous, giving person. He's a happy person, and he's happy when he's out there working, and I think it's what keeps him going, him and Mom. But yeah, this is the kind of work spirit that they were instilled with growing up, and I think that's kind of par for the course for, many, Mexicanos from that era, and even still today, right? the value of work. Growing up on a ranch, back then there was no electricity, right? There was obviously no iPhones or iPads and stuff like that. And
Right.
I mean, you just worked. And there was a love of the land. And, maybe there were frijoles and a little bit of queso and carne. But, you were a happy family and, you kind of lived off the land.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
So he came to the States through a bracero program. So I would love for you to share with our listeners what that is, because
Right.
I have a feeling not many people know about that program.
So historically, from my understanding, is that bracero was essentially a guest worker program that was installed, if I'm not mistaken, during the war years, World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, obviously a lot of the kind of like able-bodied people, men, women, were off, fighting these wars.
Right.
And so there was a shortage of labor. And so for a certain amount of time, the government here reached out to Mexico, maybe other countries too, to help, tending at the very least agricultural lands and things like that. And so that was an open door and an opportunity for, people like my dad to come and work here in given stints. Sounds like they're doing that again here a little bit. But he took advantage of that. He came over it might have been earlier than 66, it might have been 63, and did various stints up and down California in different sort of towns. I know that he was in Fresno at some point, he was up in Sebastopol, and obviously, working the lands, picking fruits and all that kind of stuff. Eventually, and there's a little bit of legend about this, and I know that this happens. This is common stories with many of the migrants that came here in that time. Was somehow they were able to finagle residency papers, la mica,
Yep.
Their papers. I know Grandpa did it by marrying some woman, right? He had a legitimate wife back home, but he married somebody here, and I don't know if that was a second marriage or a family or who knows what, but he got papers. There is talk that maybe Don Pilar did the same thing, or somehow, or I don't know, but the point is he has amica, he has residency. He's a proud Mexican, but he's been ironically he's lived most of his years here in the U.S. I mean, he came over probably at the age of around 16, 18, something like that, and he's been here since. So he's lived here 50 some odd years. But you talk to him, and he's like fresh off the boat, right? I mean, he's a true Mexicano ranchero, right? He's like he's the real deal.
That's fantastic. So how did he go from working in the fields to having a taqueria? How did that happen?
Interesting journey. I mean, I think what's very sort of apparent when you meet him is his kind of spirit, his work ethic. He's an entrepreneur. Very little education, like in school smarts, but I mean, he has ganas and garra. He strives to better and looking for opportunities. And so he went from working in the fields. He did a stint working as a cemetery worker here in Colma, the city of the dead.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is always sounds a little macabre, but yeah, I mean, it was a great union job. This was in the 80s, and where he must have been in maybe his 30s or something like that. He saw an opportunity to open up a taqueria with a couple of guys from his hometown. This is in the context of taquerias are kind of a Bay Area invention, right? Like if you go to the Mission District in San Francisco, you'll see the kind of the heartland of burritos and tacos, right? Like you go up and down Valencia or Mission Street, and everyone claims that they're the first taqueria, right? La Cumbre opened up one in '66, and El Faro and who knows what, right? And so they laid out this kind of business model, right, for this kind of efficient restaurant model, low overhead, simple menu, And Dad and a couple of his compadres said, we can do that, And in 85 in Half Moon Bay, we were growing up in Half Moon Bay at the time. Wonderful little kind of idyllic coastal town. They happened to find this open piece of real estate right on Highway 1, and said, "Yeah, this can work as a restaurant." And so they started out very very much hole in the wall and with a basic menu. And fast forward 30 some odd years, and it's still standing, and it's going very well. And it's called Tres Amigos, Three Amigos, because it's tres partners, tres socios. And it does very well for itself. So that was the first venture into taquerias.
So, and does your father cook as well?
No, he didn't provide the kind of the cooking, the cooking expertise. That was one of the other partners. You don't want him behind the
camera. No, you don't want him.
I want to make those cazuelas. No?
He's
but that's another story.
Excellent bartender. He makes a mean cazuela, mean margarita. Yeah. Very generous with his pours of tequila.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not rocket science, right? You go to our restaurants, and it's your basic kind of taqueria fare, right? Burritos, tacos, quesadillas, but it's what people like.
Right.
We now have 3 restaurants. We at times we've had more. What's very interesting is that our Tres Amigos was arguably like the starting point for many other entrepreneurs from my dad's hometown. We a lot of young guys followed the lead of my father and guys like him. They came and they started their journeys at our restaurant. They learned the ropes, and then they went off and started their own things. Young kind of hungry guys that grew up in kind of a similar back to my dad, and were just wanted to start something new. And so if you, we can trace or count small businesses up and down California that started their careers at Tres Amigos.
That is so outstanding that they've supported others, and
sure,
that's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey.
Wow. Okay, and then he goes back and starts making tequila in Mexico.
Yeah.
How did that occur? I know that it sounded like they opened a distillery, like there was a group. So was he growing agave this whole time, or?
So the interesting thing about Mexican migrants is, they leave their little ranchitos, their little pueblos,
right,
usually at a very young age, 15, 16, and either because they're tired of kind of like working with their dad on a ranch and not making much money.
I can relate to that.
Right. And they want to sort of head north. And strike out on their own and make a name for themselves. Right. And so they take this leap of faith, and it's obviously it's an arduous journey. They se brincan, by whatever means necessary, right? They make it here to the States, and they end up again, ironically, working in agriculture for a while, or maybe they're at a restaurant or something like that. And if they're ambitious enough and they kind of strive at it, eventually they'll have some sort of success, right? If they're lucky, they become small business owners and they start having a family. But I get a sense that kind of the true measure of their success is them going back home to their little pueblito, right, driving back in their big Ford truck, right, shiny new Ford American truck, and showing off what they've kind of achieved in El Norte. Maybe they found a young bride over there, and they come with that Ford truck and like, look what I achieved, and I'm a fancy like new gringo, like whatever. And they find a bride. So these, they're showing off everything they've achieved, and then they want to kind of establish themselves in their pueblo. So maybe they buy a little plot of land or something, and they want to sort of maybe continue what their parents started. Right? They buy a little ranchito and a couple of cows or whatever, and they want to sort of replicate that. Right. And so that's kind of what Dad did. It's like he started getting a little bit of success here. And he said, I'm going to reinvest it. I'm going to sort of establish and grow my roots back in my pueblo, in my hometown, because that's where, my heart is. And maybe he thought, eventually I'll come back and live in Mexico, and the USA is just a starting point, and I'll live there. I think Dad really liked it here, liked life here. I think it was what appealed to him was this sort of binationality, right? Like having one foot in each country. He liked the living in the States and everything that afforded him, and his kids growing up here, but. It gave him, I think, a lot of sort of pleasure and satisfaction to also have a presence back home in his little pueblito in Jalisco. And he would buy a little plot of land, just like his dad had. And all of a sudden he had a rancho. And it's like, well, if I have a rancho, I might as well develop it, right? And if you have a plot of land, you obviously have livestock, so you can grow, you can raise vacas and pigs and chickens, but then you can also do all kinds of crops. And in Jalisco, what they do is they have corn and they have wheat. And in our particular part of Jalisco, it's also tequila country. It's agave country. So, you've got this beautiful plant, and it's basically, for most people it's a cash crop. You plant you plant a little plot of agave. And if you have the patience, it's going to take 6 to 8 years to mature it. At the end of that cycle, you sell it off to a local distillery, right? And you make a nice little profit. These are all kind of ways of generating income and all that kind of stuff. That was kind of the model that his father taught him, right? You grow these crops and then you sell them. But growing up in tequila country, and he being kind of the entrepreneurial guy that he is, started making connections in the industry, meeting other agave farmers and other distillers and all that kind of stuff. And this must have been in the 90s when he fell upon an opportunity to actually become a stakeholder in a small new distillery. And so he thought, well, that might be a good idea, because if I become a stakeholder and an owner or partner of a distillery, then they become like a permanent source for my agave. I'll be able to sell my agave to him. And somewhere closer to the 2000s, there was an extreme kind of abundance of agave that nobody knew what to do with. Agave tends to go through these cyclical cycles of abundance and shortage and all that kind of stuff. And there's times when, so we have all this agave, and what are we going to do with it? And so Don Pilar says, well, I'll just make a tequila on mine. And God damn it, I'm going to call it Don Pilar, right? Because he being the kind of I wouldn't say vain, but very sort of proud, Alteño Highland gentleman that he is. Why not? Why wouldn't I call it Don Pilar? And so that's where the whole concept of tequila Don Pilar came about.
That is an amazing story. It truly is an amazing story. And I also read that 300,000 plants?
Yeah, I assume he...
I was like, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm like, that's a huge number.
It is, it isn't. I mean, we're still small fry compared to the big guys.
Okay.
Right?
Small fry, see, she thinks about the plants. I think about, that's a lot of things. That's my thing.
Yeah, we're still considered a small producer.
Okay.
I mean, at the end, the plants are kind of relative to the amount of land that he's been to purchase across the years, right? So he's got about 5 ranches right now, and because agave has a long maturation cycle, and if you want to assure that you will have a steady source of agave to harvest, you kind of alternate the crops. So one year you've got agave, and then another year you're going to plant another one, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a constant kind of new, fresh kind of bout of agave.
Okay, so he decides to make tequila, and it's going to be called Don Pilar.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened? How is it now in Bevmo? And How did that all happen?
So we've been on the market for 10 years now. We started in about 07, 08, actually kind of imported here into the U.S. And it's only available in the U.S. A lot of people think, oh, you must be like a brand that started in Mexico. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're a family business. It's just my dad and a couple of other people, and we don't really have any people based in Mexico to help us market it. It's a different market, and it has its own rules, and it's kind of a mafia over there. Okay. It's like very hard to penetrate that market. Okay. But Dad's story is a little bit of that kind of sort of bit of a hustler story of like almost literally selling it out of the back of his truck, in the sense that you've got a product, and you're kind of a newbie to the industry,
right?
Right. There is a whole kind of formula for success for spirits, and really for anything, right, in the States. And we were, a little kind of in the clouds about what that means, or how do you actually kind of how do you even start? And so his thing was like, well, I'm just going to go door to door to restaurants and say, hey, you want to buy my tequila? And yeah, somebody will buy a bottle or two, but there's a little bit of this sort of like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Like, you go to a typical Mexican restaurant, because that's kind of where you would start, and they're like, well, yeah, I've already got 30 tequilas on here. Like, why should I buy yours? I mean, who is this guy? I mean, I've got Patron and Cuervo and Don Julio. Why do I need this Don dude, right? And so their thing is like, well, what are you going to do for me? And so there's always like, incentives and things that you can offer, right? And they're always a little kind of murky about what's legal and what isn't. So yeah, this industry, like so many others, is about friendships and networking and things like that, right? I mean, obviously, if you had a good friend that happened to own a restaurant, then of course, Don Pilar, I'll buy your tequila and I'll help you promote it and all this kind of stuff. So it started like that. Our big break happened with Costco. And that was huge for us.
Oh, tell me about that.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
Sure.
That's when I met.
Was at Costco?
At Costco in Foster City. That's when I met Don Pilar.
Wow.
And how many years? Not that you would know when I met your dad, but
6 or 7.
I say about 7 in Foster City. Yes, and
we're so grateful that we kind of have this relationship with Costco, because
Wonderful.
I mean, we're a small little guy, and I mean, obviously you find the biggest brands at Costco, but I mean, it's such a platform for exposure. And it was somewhat kind of by luck, and also by kind of my dad's grit, that he was able to get into Costco, or at least get an opportunity. Part of it had to do, from what I understand, and some of this is sort of baked in legend. My dad's a very much a tall tale type of teller.
Okay.
He likes to sort of expand on reality. It starts becoming a little a fable-like. But he through his small business connections, his restaurants, he knew people at Costco essentially, and somehow or other he was able to kind of finagle a meeting with a buyer over there, and we pitched our story. And I think Costco, to their benefit, they do kind of have opportunities for local products. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of our in. Is like, I think maybe that our brand somehow appealed and said, yeah, we'll give you guys a chance. And yeah, they gave us our opportunities to have presence at some of the local Bay Area stores, and we really kind of ran with that opportunity. The biggest help was that they allowed for Don Pilar, my dad, to be in store promoting us as product. Now, obviously, you can't provide samples. But when you've got a guy wearing a cowboy hat,
who's very tall,
right? Kind of impressive figure,
striking man, yes.
And he's standing there with this, very kind of Mexican kind of ranchero gear, and he's standing on an aisle there in Costco. And you walk up on a Saturday, afternoon, and like, oh, hello, and oh, your face is on the bottle, and he's offering to sign a bottle for you.
Right.
Wow.
And I mean, and yeah, as a consumer, you're like, well, this must be good, and I'm meeting the owner, he's going to sign me, and on top of it, it's a fair price. Back then, it was $25 for a bottle of a really choice añejo tequila, and so it kind of word of mouth. It started growing, and arguably, I mean, I still meet people today that are like, what? I first found out about you guys through Costco. So kudos to them.
What a great story. So then, how did you get involved with the business with your dad?
Well, I'm always a naysayer with my father.
You are.
He's the kind of eternal optimist and entrepreneur. And that whole thing about like if you don't risk, you're never going to achieve anything.
Right.
That's arguably the kind of the secret to his success. Okay. And it's part of the reason. Well, I probably won't be much of a success in entrepreneurship because I'm very risk averse. I'm always the doubter. Like I don't think I want to take that leap of faith. And so I think in every venture that he's ever taken out, I'm going to start a Mexican restaurant. I'm going to start a tequila. I'm always a naysayer. Like. You should think about that, Dad. And thankfully, he never listened to me. And so, interestingly, when he said, "I'm going to start a tequila," I'm all like, "Here we go again." And I thought, well, I mean, my first thought was, I can help you with that because me being a graphic designer by kind of education and trade, I can help with kind of the formation of the brand. The development of a kind of a identity, visuals, logos, and all that kind of stuff. And for me, that was a cool opportunity because in my day job, I design, what can be look like pretty boring web pages. But here I had an opportunity to do like a kind of an actual commercial product. And you're talking tequila, which is kind of a sexy category, right? And everything that it comes with. And so, that's where my opportunity to come in to sort of like provide, my expertise and value and help kind of grow this concept or this idea.
I have to ask, do you ever have artistic differences of opinion?
Yeah, of course, all the time. I mean, it's definitely this venture, like all the other ones that involve my father and I, are always these sort of generational push and pulls, right? He says black, I say white, and sometimes we end up in the middle. Sometimes he gets to say. Sometimes I get my say. It's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would have loved a reality TV show of kind of the format. Would have been amazing, but we never had the connections to get that off the ground. So.
That's outstanding. I think the logo is gorgeous. It's really fast. I mean, using his signature.
Yeah, I mean,
great idea.
I mean, from the get-go, it was obvious that we should take that route. I mean, every product, and not just tequilas, needs a story. A kind of I mean, to put it in crass terms, a hook. Something that's going to kind of like cause a consumer to sort of like remember you or like right. I mean. Patron and some of these big brands, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to kind of like occupy a part of your brain and sort of be kind of the product of choice in a particular category. So, your first instinct to say, when you think of, upscale tequila, oh, of course I'm going to buy Patron or Don Julio. You walk into a Bevmo, that's the first thing you're going to gravitate to. That's what $500 million of a kind of annual marketing budget gets you, right?
Right.
In people's minds. And so, how are you, this fledgling new brand, going to differentiate yourself? How are you going to sort of like, ask for some attention from a kind of a consumer that's walking down that Bevmo aisle? And it's everything from the kind of the visual appearance and the logo and the vibe and what are you trying to communicate? What's your angle? And when Dad said he wanted to make a tequila, I mean, it was clear that that he should be the icon. Mm-hmm. He should be the selling point. I mean, his story, right? That his face should be on it because, in some ways, we're following the cues of other kind of icon brands. Like, for example, KFC, right? Newman's Own.
Yeah.
How many different kind of, and
Right.
and what does that communicate? When you see the face of a person on there, it's like that communicates like sort of something real and like personal and all that kind of stuff. And to see Don Pilar's face, it's like, well, it must be good if there's a person that kind of signs off on it, right? The logo, I mean, the obvious thing was to have a script face that looks like a signature, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there is a real person behind this brand. There's a lot of brands out there that are kind of nameless, or they don't have a person behind them. And I think that especially with something like a tequila that you share with friends, that there's a story behind it. There's a real person that is involved in it, and Dad is involved in it soup to nuts. He's the agave producer. He's involved in the production of it. He imports it. He hand delivers his tequila at times.
Wow.
When we were the sole distributor, he'd be driving down 2 hours away to a small little liquor store in Newman, California, deliver a case of tequila. I mean, not very not very effective in terms of time, but that's how willing how hard he was willing to sort of kind of like work for his brand to kind of fight for success.
That's an outstanding story. And I know when I checked out your website, and his story is plotted out there, and all the years and the way the old photographs. If you're listening, you should check out the site because it really is. It's such an amazing story, and like you said, it's not a manufactured story, right? It's the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, we're not a tequila that has 100 years of history. I mean, there's other brands like that, and that's very admirable. And I mean, I think every brand has their own story, but I think what we try to convey is that there is a real person behind this brand. He comes from a very particular place. What's interesting, and one of the angles that I always like to sort of talk about is that, tequila is a distilled spirit, and with the emphasis on that word spirit. And what does that connote? Spirit in the sense like, it's the essence of something. It's the essence of a place, right? And I can truly say that this tequila, like any other tequila, really, they are a distillation or essence of the place that it came from, or a place, and also the people that produced it, right? It's right. I mean, it's it's a liquid that almost has almost these kind of not spiritual qualities,
right,
but something bigger. And so that's the way I like to think about our tequila, is that, my dad comes from the highlands of Jalisco, this little beautiful, magical pueblo, and the people there, the characters and the cobblestone streets and the aromas and all that kind of stuff. Our tequila is a distillation of that.
It's beautiful. Very nicely said, Juan Carlos.
Thank you.
Very nice. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is the different types of tequila that you make, because we haven't even gotten into that.
Right.
And so, full disclosure, I didn't know that you could really sip tequila. I'm not much of a drinker, but my prima introduced, because I always like, a margarita. I had I know, but I had no idea. I know, but I had no idea. So my prima has set me straight. And she has tequila tasting parties. But now I understand, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so delicious, and there's so many different flavors. And I have to say, honestly, I love yours. I really, really love yours. It's just outstanding. So if you could share with our listeners the different types of tequilas, because they're very distinct, the different tastes and types that you
Sure,
make.
definitely. What strikes me as kind of that one of the first remarks you said was about this idea that tequila is a sipping tequila, because I think a lot of us who grew up here in the States, our first introduction to tequila was kind of a party drink, right?
Right.
I won't mention specific brands, but we all have our tequila stories, whether that be in high school, i.e. underage, or in college at a more legitimate age, where, we had some sort of tequila and we were, it was the kind of the instigator for the party, right? Somebody's, the rabble rouser, like, would line up 10 shots with lime and salt and like a big whoop and everybody down the hatch, right? And the next morning, I mean, you were maybe not loving life too much, and for many different reasons.
Right.
that was, when I was growing up in the 80s, that was kind of sort of par for the course. Since then, we've seen a renaissance in tequila production, in tequila appreciation. The concept of a premium sipping tequila, with kind of code words like artisanal, and,
Right.
all that kind of stuff, right? And it's all cool. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's enticing, and there's been a little bit of a education program by producers about how we can truly appreciate a tequila. Forget the lime and the salt, forget the shot glass. Tequila is on par with any other beautiful spirit, like a cognac or whiskey or whatever, where if you as a consumer are willing to pay, upwards of $15, $20, $30, $50 for a serving of this, and the first thing is you serve it in a nice glassware, right? Forget the shot glass. It might be a cognac snifter or a flute or a whiskey glass or whatever, and then after that, it's like there's so many different profiles, different ages, right? You asked, what do we offer? Any particular brand, ours included, you're going to offer anything from a Blanco, which is a kind of a unaged tequila, and that has its particular profile. Very vegetal is a common word that you hear. It feels kind of green and fresh and maybe a little citrusy, aromatic. And then from there, you can start aging tequila. So what producers do is they literally, put it in a barrel. It might be an American oak barrel, a sherry cask, a cognac cask. And as you can imagine, every one of those barrels is going to impart a different profile to it. And then on top of that, the amount of aging, right? So if you lightly age it for, say, 6 months, that's considered a reposado, something that's been lightly rested. And what that tends to be is a nice kind of harmonious balance between these agave flavors and a little hint of oak. And beyond that, the longer you age it, the more tannins, the more vanilla, the more cognac or whiskey like. And so at that point, it's like, well, it just kind of depends on what your preference is. My common question is, for kind of newcomers to the categories, well, do you tend to sort of gravitate towards the clear spirits like a vodka or kind of a clear rum, or are you more of a whiskey bourbon person? And similarly, you might prefer my whites over red ones. And so that might be kind of a hint or a guide of what you might gravitate to in the tequila world. Me personally, I enjoy brown spirits, aged spirits, somewhere in the 1 year to 2 or 3 year. We're sipping right now our extrañejo.
It's amazing.
It's a beautiful. I mean, it's a nectar. It's very luscious and it's a beautiful sipping tequila. It's been aged for 3.5 years in 2 types of barrels, American and French oak. That French really kind of imparts a almost cognac-like quality to it. It's decadent, and and it's definitely Dad's sort of pride and joy. He really enjoys sipping it and sharing it with friends.
Well, thank you for explaining that. That's really helpful for me and all our listeners, I'm sure, because that definitely helps. So tell me this. You talked about your father earlier being an amazing bartender. And I know that at one of his restaurants, he makes these amazing drinks. I think they're called, are they called cazuelas?
Cazuelas.
Cazuelas. So let's tell our listeners about these cazuelas.
So first of all, Dad has 3 Mexican restaurants, and
Okay.
Unfortunately, only one of them has a full liquor license. So if you happen to be in the Bay Area, we have a place in Half Moon Bay called Tres Amigos. That was the original restaurant. Another one in San Mateo. But his kind of flagship, if you want to call it that, is in Portola Valley, which is kind of mid-peninsula, nice woodsy town. And that one is called Amigos Grill, Cocina Mexicana y Cantina, with an emphasis on the cantina. Dad, being the hard worker that he is, works 7 days a week, right alongside Mom. So you're bound to sort of meet up with him. and you're likely going to end up with a free shot of tequila. That's how generous he is.
Or just 4, the way I have.
I'm guessing he can gauge people's ages well, and he's not serving the minors. But yeah, he's been known to just sort of like kind of amble up and down the tables and say, "Here, have a little shot of my tequila," proudly sharing his stuff. Now, whether he's a good bartender or not is a matter of debate. I would say he's a good bartender in the sense he's very generous with his pours and all that. Right. Me being a bit more sort of specific on quantities, I feel is a little too heavy on the tequila sometimes and his mixtures. But his clientele is very happy.
Very happy.
That's right. Happy customers, happy life. But yeah, the cazuela is essentially kind of Mexico's answer to the sangria. First of all, he sells it. He serves it in a large kind of earthenware bowl, meaning it's good for 2 or 3 people or one very hungry person,
it's like
or a thirsty person.
So it's like a giant soup bowl is the way I can think.
Sure.
It's so big.
Yes,
it's so big.
And it's being sangria like it's essentially a cocktail or concoction made up of on the rocks, plenty of añejo tequila. And then a combination of citrus juices, so orange and tangerines and grapefruits and things like that, lime. A little bit of agave nectar to sweeten it up, and then he actually puts in some soda as well. So what's beautiful about our restaurant is that it has a lovely patio, so come by on a weekend, on a Saturday or Sunday when you've got nothing to do for a few hours. Amble up to the bar, order a cazuela de Don Pilar. Like I said, good for at least 2 or 1 person that's going to hang around for 3 or 4 hours. And, order something off the menu. We've got a great menu there.
That's fantastic. So, what do you think what do you think your father might get into next? Is tequila where he's going to go, or is he going to try anything else that's new and different?
He gets offered up a lot of other opportunities, but I think he's at an age where he's steady.
Okay.
I guess the big question is, when will his family step up and start helping out? Because, all his son and daughters are they have their own careers. They're busy raising families and things like that. And here he is in his 70s, still working 7 days a week and waiting to sort of maybe somebody to step up and help out.
Okay. Well, I've seen you at tequila tastings, and you're doing his artwork and marketing and PR. So
it's definitely a fun family passion project. I mean, it's obviously kind of like a huge source of pride to be able to sort of help grow this brand.
Right.
And I'm very comfortable doing it in small spurts, but I don't know if I have the work ethic, the 24/7, 7 days a week work ethic that he has. I grew up in a much more comfortable life here in California. I think his early years, literally working since he was probably 10 years old, or even younger, I think really kind of set him up for a lot of success in his life.
So, what have been some of the challenges that you guys have faced just from a business perspective? You're a small tequila company,
sure.
So would you mind sharing some of that with our listeners?
I mean, it started off with us just being total noobs in the industry, right? I mean, prime sort of situation to make a lot of mistakes and waste a lot of money. I mean, not a lot of money in the sense that we've gone out of business, but we probably went down some avenues that weren't that very efficient. Maybe sort of made deals with maybe the wrong people or who knows what, but I think that's par for the course for any kind of new business. It's been slow growth for us. Thankfully, we haven't been in the rush to get to find quick success, because from what I've seen, that could be a recipe for failure. I mean, I've seen brands that have invested tens of millions of dollars and ended up just belly up. A lot of money doesn't necessarily or investment doesn't necessarily assure you success. Thankfully, my father has had tacos and burritos to help subsidize the production of tequila, and I think for a long time, this was, not a money making venture. Not that it necessarily is right now. Again, we're a small producer. What's going to define success for us as a brand? I don't know. I mean, it's still completely family owned. We don't have any investors. We're starting to see kind of growth. But very slow. So, but it's we're happy, I suppose, in the sense that it's a family business. We own all control of it, and we're starting to see some success, and people are kind of responding to it.
That's outstanding. I know that with me and what I've been doing, I'm definitely not financially successful yet with my side hustle, but it brings me a lot of joy.
Sure.
And I've met some amazing people. So it's been so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
It really has been so much fun. So it sounds like you've had some of that experience as well.
Yeah. We, for example, this past weekend, we were in Monterey, California for the Monterey Tequila Expo. Monterey Tequila and Cuisine Expo, which is basically a tequila festival. And, it's an opportunity to sort of like meet old friends and new friends, and you get a lot of love. I mean, Don Pilar is a rock star in the tequila world. Like people flock to him and they want to take selfies with him and post them up on Instagram. And he loves the attention, and I think it's a kind of a validation of, what he's achieved in the tequila world. So and there is a community of people that enjoy, spirits and I think his story resonates with a lot of people. They recognize, the kind of like the real person and who he is, and So it's definitely there's a lot of we get a lot of joy from this business, from how we're able to share it with people.
So I can't believe that we haven't talked about this, but where can people buy your tequila other than Costco?
So yes. Well, I will say that California is kind of our home base and the place where it's most available. Thankfully, we have fairly large retailers around here, in addition to Costco, places like Bevmo, Total Wine and Spirits, and then a whole slew of other kind of smaller retailers, in Northern California, starting to grow in Southern California. And beyond that, we're expanding to other states as well. Mostly the Western Coast, but West Coast, but available, I think, in New York, and maybe kind of we're working on Illinois and Florida and stuff like that. There's a number of online vendors. I mean, it's probably as easy as probably Googling Don Pilar, and you can find some sort of vendor that's able to sort of mail you a bottle out to you.
And if you like tequila or you want to try new tequilas, I highly recommend this one, and I know Eva does as well.
I did post some of the pictures right now.
You did? Okay.
Yes, I do. And you know that, kind of like Juan Carlos, I like the añejos and extra añejos. No limón, no sal. Y de traguitos, poco a poco.
So for non-speaking listeners, it's basically she's saying, just sip it. Don't use the salt. Don't use the limes.
Please don't drink a beer and a cheese. Come on, guys, really. And never, ever, ever, Juan Carlos, please let them know. Never mix an extra añejo with anything. That's a no-no.
Yeah, you don't use it in a margarita or...
No.
Well, I mean, it's not unheard of to find our extra añejo going for about $35 a pour. If you're willing to spend $35, I suppose you deserve the right to have it in a margarita. You can have it however you like. I suppose.
Just not around me.
But yeah, it's definitely a sublime spirit that you want to sort of sample straight on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Instagram, right? So we can follow you on Instagram. You want to share your social media?
Yeah. I mean, we've got all kind of the expected things. We have a website, donpilar.com. Facebook is probably the place where we post a lot of our updates and news and things like that, where you may be able to find the man Don Pilar doing a signing or who knows like that. And then, yes, Instagram as well for the kids. I know the kids are all on Instagram. It's helpful. I mean, it's for a small brand or business. it's so liberating to be able to sort of communicate your story and kind of control your message via social media. It's been a huge kind of like democratizer, I guess, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's fantastic because it really does give smaller businesses the opportunity to control their brand and to really expand their reach.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful, fun story. I mean, whether you're a tequila drinker or not, just the food, the meeting him. He is such a presence, as are you. I want you to know that.
Yes.
You are also, yes. And I had the opportunity also to see Don Pilar in San Diego's Tequila Festival about 6-7 years ago as well. But just the positive energy these two men carry within themselves and share their passion with us.
Well, and I love that it's a story of immigrants from Mexico, and my grandmother's from Jalisco as well.
Sure.
So in a way, I'm like, oh, it's my family. My family's doing really well. So
I mean,
mi familia too. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's always been kind of our story. I mean, it's a celebration of the Mexican American dream, and especially in this kind of political climate, it's so refreshing to hear these success stories, right? Because I mean, unfortunately, there's in some circles there's a demonization of the immigrant, right? And my dad is a testament to kind of the positive contributions that immigrants bring to to this country.
I absolutely love that. Okay, so we found out that your father doesn't cook at all, but you're here with Molé Mama, so I have to know, do you cook at all?
I enjoy cooking. I mean, I can cook in a small setting. If and when the opportunity comes for me to sort of like be more present in my mother's kitchens, I'd like to think that I can sort of bring some innovations. I mean, I love Mexican cuisine. I'm a huge connoisseur of that cuisine in all its forms, everything from the many different types of restaurants you'll find here in the Bay Area to obviously, home cooked meals. I love going to places like, I'll do a shout out to Gloria Dominguez, Tamarindo restaurant in Oakland. Beautiful place.
Oh, I've heard.
We have not been there.
She is a beacon for Mexican cuisine. So shout out to you. Copita in Sausalito. And then, I mean, these are the kind of the more higher end, but I mean, all the local taquerias here. I mean, people always ask, well, where should I go eat? Where can I get authentic Mexican food? And some of the most authentic you're going to find in a kind of hole in the wall taqueria because it comes down to the ingredients, the quality of the beans and the quality of the salsas, right? Just because it's a hole in the wall, and maybe they only serve tacos and burritos, like. Tacos is the most perfect Mexican food, right? It's a small little vehicle, and it's a distillation, right? In the same way tequila is a distillation of Mexican culture. It's a simple little, this little circular tortilla, and you put a meat on top of it, a little cilantro, cebolla, and the salsa, and it's just like it's explosive in your mouth, and there's so many different kind of iterations and versions of it. So yeah.
Oh, I love tacos. Our whole family likes tacos.
Yes, we do.
We definitely do. We have taco parties frequently. So with the last couple of minutes that you have, what do you think has been the biggest thing that you have learned from your father?
He has many positive qualities. Generosity is probably generosity and that hard work ethic are probably the most outstanding qualities. So if I can emulate those qualities, that to me seems like the kind of the secret to happiness and success and maybe a long life.
That is really beautiful. And do you think that someday you might be working with him full time?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the natural sort of like camino or road for me. I've been working in my career for forever, but this seems to be the kind of my path.
That's outstanding. Well, I can't believe that we are out of time. It has been an honor to have you here with
My
us
pleasure.
tonight. Very wonderful experience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
both
you.
Of you, Diana.
Thank you, Juan
Mama.
Carlos. Thank you, Eva, for beating him down and getting him here.
I have given
I
a little break
would have
every
done
now
this
and
years
then.
ago.
I give you a little break every now and then.
But thank you. And please tell your father that we're just very inspired by his story. It's a wonderful story. So to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I want to thank Scott for producing our show. Remember to add the most important ingredient to every recipe you make, your love. And as my mama always said to me as we said our goodbyes, que Dios te bendiga. Soul to Soul with Nancy Newman is up next, so please stay tuned for her show. Thank you for tuning in to Molé Mama, and have a wonderful evening and a great weekend, everyone.
Good night.
Buenas noches.
Thank you for tuning in to Molé Mama. Remember to add love to every recipe you make. It is your secret ingredient. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and check out our YouTube channel and make those yummy recipes for your loved ones and connect and have fun and enjoy. Que Dios te bendiga. May God bless you.